Hello. Like so many of us today, I find myself at home just trying to stay out of harm's way and looking for meaningful ways to fill the void. I was introduced to fly tying more than 50 years ago, and under these circumstances, tying flies is my go-to pastime. I've also been experimenting with making videos, and maybe by sharing this is a way for me to give back. Fly tying has meant so much to me for all these years. So today I'm going to tie for you a moose hair bodied chironomid. So you see the moose hair right there. There's a tuft of that. I have some tools laying out. Notice that I'm using a number 16 green Caddis Outfitters hook. It's a long curved shank, kind of made for this. And there's some yarn in the background that I use for the breathers or gills. Showed you the crystal flash upside down the first time. And so chironomids aren't normally a go-to pattern for me. We fish a lot of freestone streams here in western Pennsylvania, but it makes a nice dropper, and fish seem to like it, and it fools a few of them. So you saw some peacock herl and pheasant tail, a couple of key components. And of course, to hold it all together, some head cement or UV resin is pretty much, it's a must in this case, because the moose hair tends to be pretty delicate, kind of like deer hair. Now here I'm showing you a shepherd's hook and my hackle pliers, and I kind of point it out now, and I'll show you later. It's a technique that I use for either doing dubbing loops, or often I'll use it for twisting herl between the thread to kind of stiffen it up, make a herl chenille. So we'll talk more about that in a second, or when we get to it. The hook is in the vise, and I'm starting to like that loon bobbin. I'm not sure how long the stainless, I've heard people complain about it, how long the stainless is going to last, but it fits my hand, it's nice and smooth, and I don't know, it's simple, right? 2 arms, and stick the spool in, no other moving parts, and you're good to go. So there's the piece of crystal flash going in. I use that to rib the body. It helps with segmentation, gives it a little glint, catches some light. And so I'll move my thread back up to the around somewhere near the hook point. It's nice, I can tell you if I narrate after I do it, I can tell you exactly what I did if I was doing it while I'm doing it. Again, learning as I go. So there you see I've grabbed 4 strands of moose hair. Like to get the some varying color so that it looks more segmented. So I'll tie the tips going forward to the tie-in point, and then come back over it. By doing that and coming back up forward, it kind of keeps the body nice and even. When you're wrapping hair, you want a nice smooth underbody. And of course, a bumpy look on a chironomid is not a bad thing. And then here, the old 1-finger half hitch, again, trying to stay in between the camera and the fly. So I'll get more confident in learning how much room I really have and what tools fit and what don't. But so here I'm going to counter wrap those moose hairs. So you'll see they almost start to get away from me there, but they're really not bad. You kind of hold them in a tuft. Some they wrap over themselves just a little bit, but in the end they're kind of smooth and make a nice segmented body. So this is probably a good time to point out, I do this body for nymphs and even on dry flies. I tend to use the head cement when I coat it. Well, I coat it with head cement on dry flies rather than the UV. I feel like it's lighter, but I don't know that it really matters. So we'll trim out the excess and throw a whip or 2 on there so that I can hang the thread over my bobbin cradle and use the rotary feature. And here we're getting ready to rib the fly with the crystal flash. So going forward, trying to keep the segments about somewhat realistic and as even as possible. And fish don't care, but your friends will sure make fun of your flies if they don't look the way they expect them to. So same thing here. I'm going to get a couple of wraps to hold it down, fold it back over itself, and then trim off the excess, put in a whip finish or two, and throw the thread back over the bobbin cradle. And again, the rotary feature is nice for certain things like this, but it makes it kind of real nice when it comes time to put on the UV. I cut a little more off that tip than I meant to, and it comes out a little quicker than I would like, but yeah, if you're careful, it doesn't end up all over everything. And it is UV, you get to wipe it up before it dries to something that where you didn't really want it. Dubbing needle to smooth it out. It's looking pretty good. And we'll hit it with the Loon UV torch. So I don't know, I usually give this about 10 seconds. I don't think I'm counting while I'm doing this. But we want to make sure it's good and dry so the other materials don't stick to it. The Loon finish dries pretty nice, so it doesn't have that oily residue like others do. And here I'm going to fold in a piece of yarn. It's just one strand from a 4-ply Antron yarn. It's cream colored. So I like to fold the materials around to wrap them in. Helps me kind of pinpoint the location. It doesn't really take all that much to hold the yarn in place, just we're going to crisscross it and wrap in front and then go back. Just kind of eyeballing where I want the wing case to start. And I was going to say, if I remember correctly, I came in here and snipped a little off of the yarn just so it was easier to work around it. So now the wing case. Those are pheasant tail fibers, and I have the shiny side down. There happens to be a shiny side on that tail feather for some reason. I have it down. Not that I think that matters a lot, and there are 10 fibers there. I do count them usually because that's the way I'm wired, but a bundle of fibers or a chunk of fibers or hair is, after a while you get to know what that is anyways, with or without counting. So snip off the butts. And then now it's time to tie in the peacock curl. So here again, I'll fold it in the middle. On some flies, tying in by the tips or tying in by the butt section makes sense. In a lot of applications, I like to just fold it in, tie it in by the middle, and you're getting kind of the most useful part of the herl. It's kind of consistent in the middle, and so here's that little trick. So I'll clip the thread in to the 2 strands of herl, fold the tying thread back up over, fight the curly end there for a second, and put a couple of wraps in to hold that in place. And that's a good idea to put a whip finish or 2 here. or one. See, and call it as I see it. Okay, then I'm pretty sure I do snip the curly ends off right about now. And I reach for the shepherd's hook. I'll hook that in the hackle plier, give it a spin until it looks like chenille. That double thin tying thread mixed with the herl makes that stuff pretty bulletproof. And then wrap it up tight against the gills. I think we're going to quit there. Here's where I do the drop over, or the drop of the tying thread and bobbin. I like to usually rotate the vise and control both materials and not necessarily drop it like you just saw. But in this case, and working in front of camera, I opted just to kind of sling it up over the top and get a wrap on it. So that's one of the advantages of rotary vices, is you can turn to wherever you're going to finish and keep both of your materials in your hand, and you can kind of switch hands without losing control of materials. A little easier. I don't hear many folks call that out when they're tying flies on a rotary vise, but it's something I kind of get used to. Now I'll need a wrap or two to hold the pheasant. You saw me kind of smooth that out so that it's, all the strands are parallel and it's a nice even layer. You can pull up on the tips a little bit. It helps you locate the tying thread. And then it's time to snip off the excess. And one little thing here, and I've heard others call this out, but if you start wrapping at the eye and work your way back, it's easier to kind of cover the butt section, or the butts off without having your thread drop back down. And then I have three whips here, essentially on top of each other, but the cut end will be on top and it'll all be coated in UV resin, so it's not going to go anywhere either. So now we come to the part where we cut the gills to length, breathers. I suppose those are gills of some sort. And I bump my scissor against the bottom blade of the scissor against the front of the hook, and that way they're always the same length. So here we go. A little bit of resin on the pheasant tail fibers to stiffen them up. And I'll do this in 2 layers in this case because I'm still using the thin stuff. Try and get the light to it pretty quick on the first layer so it doesn't all soak in and it hardens. And then I'll come back and do another coat just to kind of smooth things up a little more and make sure I didn't miss anything. So if you're still watching, thanks for hanging in there. We're almost to the end. I have a slide coming up with some descriptive material and the actual pattern, and a little bit of self-promotion at the end. I've written a couple of books, so if you want to learn more about me, I'm on Amazon. I've released several books out there, and there's some description, and I'm not urging you to buy books. I'm just pointing to that because it's a nice place where I've told a little more of my story. So thanks for hanging in there, watching this through until the end, and until